I'm going to teach you how to get ahead of 99% of UI UX designers. My name is Kyle. Over the past 6 years, I've worked for some of the top up-and-coming startups, as well as a Fortune 500 company. I currently earn a salary that's in the top 1% of UI UX designers in the United States. I've also mentored other designers, helping them to secure their first job and set a course towards reaching the top of their field. Now, the first thing you need to do to get ahead of 99% of designers is to treat yourself like an evolving product. This means adopting the same mindset you would use when designing a product and applying it to yourself. As designers, we follow a product development cycle of releasing a minimum viable product, learning what works, and iterating. This approach has been proven time and time again to create the most successful products. What isn't talked about often is how we can follow this exact same process to become top 1% designers. At the beginning of our careers, we're equivalent to a minimum viable product, equipped with just enough design expertise to make an impact, yet with plenty of room for growth and refinement. We're still years away from being the version of ourselves that companies will pay top dollar to hire. The best designers understand this and will do whatever they can to learn their weak points and improve. There's a few main ways that you can figure out what exactly needs to be improved. The first is getting feedback from the market. This primarily occurs during job searches or interviews. If you aren't advancing past certain stages, it likely reveals a weak point. For instance, if you aren't making it past portfolio presentations, it can mean that you aren't addressing different design problems or communicating your solution's value. So always ask for feedback after a rejection. The second is feedback from peers. Once you're working a full-time job or doing client work, this can be the best time for learning. The people that you work with will be able to give you the best feedback. It can be uncomfortable asking for that feedback, but I promise it's worth it. And the third is self-reflection. If we take a step back after a project and analyze what worked well and what did not, there are tremendous opportunities for growth. We are the ones who know ourselves best, and we can often point out our weak spots if we're being honest with ourselves. The key with learning to improve is to look for patterns and consistent feedback, just like you would when iterating on a design. If something comes up consistently, it's a good sign that you need to improve on it to reach the next level. We always need to remember that we are never a finished product. The second way to get ahead of 99% of designers is by thriving in ambiguity. Most designers cannot function without direction. They sit around waiting for projects or small tasks and only work when they receive a ticket that spells out exactly what to do. A good way to approximate a designer's level is to see how they work when few instructions are given. Designers who can solve ambiguous problems are usually going to be paid the highest. A top 1% designer can be told about a problem and then lay out their own strategy on how to fix it. So how do you thrive in ambiguity? Well, the first step is to accept it. Don't shy away from the responsibility when you don't have all the answers. You'll often need to spend time digging deeper into a problem, strategizing, and having conversations with people who have more context. All of this will usually happen before you start designing anything. As an example, let's say leadership comes to you and says that there are not enough people upgrading from the free version of a product to the paid one. This is a common ambiguous problem that designers encounter. Many designers will take their best guess as to what the solution is. Maybe the sign-up needs to be more prominent, or maybe the value needs to be communicated more clearly. This may or may not have a positive impact. A top 1% designer will do work that was not asked of them to develop a complete understanding of the problem. They'll dig into any existing research, maybe conduct their own, analyze the competition, and talk to other people at the company who have additional context. Their solution will come from a well-informed place and have a much better chance of solving the problem. Next time you're given a problem like this, think, what extra steps can I take to make this less ambiguous and become the expert on how to solve it? There are often time constraints that would prevent us from doing this in an ideal way, but do whatever you can given the constraints that you have. The third way to become a top 1% designer is to prioritize outside learning. Many designers will immerse themselves in learning as much as possible when they are beginners. They'll spend countless hours taking a boot camp, watching courses or YouTube videos, and reading articles. This causes them to improve rapidly and get to the point where they can start doing paid work, but all too often they will stop learning once they start working. And sure, they will continue improving from the hands-on experience, but the top 1% designer will continue with that outside learning all throughout their career. They have this mindset that there is always something new to learn. Let's say we compare two designers over a 10-year period. The first one stops learning once they get their first job. The other one spends just 2 hours per week reading or watching content from the best in the industry. I guarantee you that the one who devotes that time to learning will be far ahead in their career, working at the best companies and making a much higher salary. That designer will have spent more than 1,000 hours acquiring new knowledge. They will likely be a true expert, and it'll be obvious to anyone who works with them. You might be wondering what kind of learning you should spend your time on. I personally believe that taking long-form courses are always going to be the best for developing new skills and making them stick. I've taken many courses, but I believe that the ones from the designership are the best. I took their Figma course and UI UX course recently, and it made me a much better designer. If you're interested, you can use my link in the description and enter code KTORAS10 for 10% off any course. Now, the fourth way to get ahead is to be business-minded. As a designer, you need to be an expert at solving business problems. That's what's going to have the biggest impact. If your designs can positively change target metrics, you're going to make companies more money and have a better career. The typical mindset of a designer is to just make something work well enough so that people aren't having trouble using it, but they aren't going above a certain threshold where they're really having an impact on the business. Now, in truth, this is harder to do at big companies, but it's still a good perspective to maintain, and especially if you're trying to land your first big opportunity. I developed this mindset from my Upwork days, where I would actually be talking to business owners and seeing the direct impact of my work. A true business-minded designer is someone who sees the design of a product as one of the most important ways for a company to get ahead in a market. They make decisions based on past data or desired outcomes for the future. All of their conversations about design always touch on what this means for the business. This is a difficult skill set to develop because we have to learn to see design from a much broader perspective. I think the best way to get there is to spend time working for a good growth-focused startup. These are the kinds of opportunities where we get to clearly see the impact that design has on a business. There's likely going to be clear data attached to everything that we work on. There's going to be many conversations had about this data that will teach us more and more along the way. If that isn't an option, this can certainly be learned at larger companies as well. You may just have to push to be included in these conversations. I've seen many situations where junior to mid-level designers are left out of these meetings, and it's mostly leadership who's involved. There's also a few great books that can teach this approach. I would recommend reading Hacking Growth, The 4 Steps to the Epiphany, and The Lean Startup. All these books are about making product decisions that impact the business. Many designers are not going to go out of their way to do this. If you do, I guarantee that this will put you on another level and fast track your career. That wraps up the advice that I had about getting ahead of 99% of designers. Thanks for checking it out, and I'll see you in the next one.